Hello everyone and welcome to KTG Armory. I hope you really enjoyed me LARPing in the backyard of my house. It was so much fun and I'm sure I completely weirded out the neighbors as I always do. Today we are talking about something that would probably need no introduction for any of my British viewers, but probably some of my American viewers may be like, he's just got another M4 and it's short and he's got it on the table and what have you. But no, my dear friends, this is no M4. This is an L119A1. Almost. This isn't exactly an L119. There are a few inaccuracies and things that I would need to do to truly make this exactly a one-to-one clone. We're not going into the details of that. I'm more focused on the setups that UKSF used, particularly SAS and SBS, over the years. So a quick overview of what this rifle is. So this rifle was commissioned by UKSF. They went to Dymaco, which eventually became Colt Canada. Dymaco had actually acquired the patents from Colt previously to make the C7 and the C8. They noticed that the Americans were making this great rifle, but they were making it absolutely garbagely, and so they said, you know what, why don't we just throw that in the bin, we'll make our own rifle and it'll be absolutely chef's kiss. Perfect. But I'm going to drop the accent because that was incredibly hard to do. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details of what completely differentiates this from a basic shorty M4, but I'll give you a quick overview of the general features that automatically stand out as an L119A1 rifle. So the very first, kind of two obvious things are the stock and the grip. This is a Storm Grip from Lone Star Industries. Obviously, it's different than the A2 style grip, but it's about the same basic feel and functionality. The main difference is that this piece is thicker and on both instances, so both this way and that way. So it does give a little bit of a better feel, but this is the first obvious thing that you notice that's different from an M4. And then the Car 15 butt stock. But those are the two kind of big differences that you'll automatically notice with the rifle. This next one is the ambidextrous charging handle. This is not necessarily a great design, but it was made so that you could, have ambidextrous features. The other main feature of this would be the 10-inch barrel. Not 10.3, not 10.5, 10 inches exactly. Shipping from Colt Canada, this is how they would arrive. They come with their Knights Armament RAS system with the rail covers, and then they would also have, if I can grab this, would also have a Knights Armament broom handle. That would, mount like that. There would be a carry handle on here. It's not the same as an M4 carry handle. The bottom part is actually cut out, and so it's basically, it sits on top and it bolts in here, and there is no bottom section as you would normally see on an M4. But without further ado, let's get into our first rifle build, and that is going to be from the Task Force Black era.
Bravo 6, going dark.
And voila, we have our Task Force Black setup. Now, Task Force Black was spun up about 2003, 2004, and what it was a joint task force of American and British special operations. Task Force Black, primarily what they're doing is DAMs, right? Direct action missions. They're going to hit targets. They're doing a lot of CQB, and that's why the 10-inch variant starts to be a lot more prolific. It's a much more wieldy weapon coming in and out of buildings. Up at the front, you see they swap out the initial birdcage flash hider for a Surefire FH 556-212A, and this is the closed tine variant. Now, one thing to note with this is that at the very beginning, you see the closed tine variant. A little bit further on, you're going to start seeing that open four-prongy, strange-looking one, but at the beginning, it was simply the closed-tined one. That paired beautifully with the Surefire can right here. That would just slide on the end. All of y'all know how suppressors and things work. I didn't move the locking collar all the way, and there we go, and that would thread on. Now, this rifle was an incredibly wieldy one, however, it would be very heavy. This is not necessarily a light suppressor by any means, and the barrel inside is a very heavy profile barrel, so this was a little bit of a heavier rifle to use. So to compensate for that, you start seeing the addition of the Tango down grip. You do still see the normal, Knight's Armament broom handle, but a lot of operators start moving to a Tango down grip. They'll start moving to a pressure pad for their light. Now this is the incorrect light for Task Force Black. The light for Task Force Black should be an M651C. This is just an M600C. But it should be an M651C, especially at the beginning when they're, starting to work and do that CQB. The way UKSF did their night vision, they had the PEG-2. That was pretty common for most soft units at the time, and so they threw those on there. Now this setup tended to be the one that you would see primarily through the Task Force Black era. It didn't really deviate much from this except towards 2005, 2007-ish, you start seeing the introducing of the EOTech, and that would be this variant, the long boy version that you saw in the beginning. I can't exactly remember what the British MOD classified these as. I just call it the long boy EOTech because it's a long boy. In terms of functionality and things like that, it is a very easy rifle to use. I will say this is a heavier setup because all of these features, as we're at the beginning of the global war on terror and everything's starting to get developed, not everything has really been scaled down yet. And so a lot of our things are a lot of electronics and a lot of heavy metals, heavy materials, because we're really trying to focus on making things durable, but also work. And so it lends to a lot of large packages and a particularly heavy build, especially when you pair it with a Stanag type magazine, and not the polymer ones like PMags. But this is your standard Task Force Black setup. On the whole, it's a good setup. I like it a little bit. It's not my favorite setup per se, but I do appreciate it, and kind of, you can see the development of SOF and how they're starting to use their rifles, how they're starting to build out their rifles as they get into that really, counterterrorism, DA focused missions, as opposed to what they were originally training for, which is a near peer conflict. And so seeing the beginning of that evolution is really cool, especially with something that the base rifle doesn't really change much as we continue on, but the attachments and things certainly do. And that segues me nicely into our next setup, which is going to be Afghanistan 2010 to about 2012. All right, now we've got Afghanistan, about 2010 to about 2012, probably 2013-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. So one thing you can notice immediately is that not much changed. It's still pretty much basically the same rifle with just a LA5 as opposed to the PEC-2, and now we're seeing the introduction of the Surefire M600 series. But pretty much nothing else really changed, and that's something that I think is a little bit intrinsic to UKSF and European SF in general. American SF has money basically printed for them. They have everything that they could want, particularly if you're talking about Delta and DebCrew, and if they want something, they go get it, right? That doesn't happen with UKSF, European SF, the Norwegians, the Swedes, the French. Doesn't really happen that way. They work with what they've got, and their command says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But we're looking at Afghanistan. So obviously we're kind of winding down a little bit in Iraq, not seeing as much action. And so this is a little bit more of a SBS rifle for the Afghanistan deployments. Afghanistan, you're seeing a lot more mountains, a lot more rural countryside, and so the ACOG is certainly something that a lot of them are going to be using. I unfortunately do not have the top dot that would normally be mounted here, but you're seeing that a lot more is that additional piggyback dot on the top. We do see this light system kind of this light setup make a little bit of more of a resurgence. If I was to do this, I would probably put the foregrip on there. I took it off because I saw a few rifles that were built this way, and I thought that might be a good idea to spice things up for the video. But if I was to do it this way, I'd probably have a foregrip. That way, when I was here, just like at the beginning, I can kind of make that click and just be there. But on the whole, this is a decent setup. We're cutting down a little bit more on weight, but not by much, because really the only thing that changed was the laser unit. We went from the PEC-2 to the LA5, and that's the only thing that's really changed. So this is still a relatively heavy rifle. we are starting to see a little bit of grip change and stock change. Not much though, that's gonna come kind of in a second. But that's about Afghanistan, probably 2010 to 2013, somewhere in there, 2012. Now let's move on to the fun part where people started customizing their rifles, and that would be 2013-ish, end of 2013-ish, up until 2016 when the A2 starts to make its appearance. All right, and here we are, and this will be kind of the last iteration of setups that we see for the L119A1, and that's going to be about 2013 to 2016. Now, something I forgot to mention previously was we see the introduction of this flash hider, right? And this is that kind of interesting one that most people associate with UKSF rifles. Is that four-prong, interesting one. It's basically a four-prong, but they shave down some of the sides on the top, and I don't know why they went with this or why UKSF went with this over a general four-prong setup from Surefire, but that's what we've got. And this is the flash hider that you will see on all UKSF rifles up until the KS1, which just came out. But now we come into some of the fun parts, the customization of things. The EOTech comes back in, and we do now start to see the adoption of the Comp M5, Comp M4, particularly on GG and G mounts, and then at the end of the era, sometime around 2015, 2016, we start to see the T1 on GG and G mounts as well. But the basic setup remains a little bit more of the same, except we get to see more customization. So we start having the addition of other stocks. We have the Magpul STR and CTR stocks. We've got a few other grips. We start seeing the Magpul MOE style grips, Hogue overmolded grips. I did not change out the grip because I personally enjoy this Storm grip. I think it fits my hand very nicely. But we also start to see the introduction of the AFG and a lot more of them being used. Now, this setup is certainly my preferred setup. I think the AFG lets you really index the rifle nicely. As I said in the SCAR video, this is the Magpul STR. I like this a lot. I did put a little bit of tape on this side where my face comes into contact because there is a little bit of a divide right here and my beard would tend to get caught up in there, and that was painful, and so I put a little bit of tape there, and now I've got a nice wonderful cheek weld. I think this stock is a really nice way to balance out this rifle because the rifle did not change. It is still a very heavy profile barrel and is still a heavier suppressor up at the front, and so this rifle as a whole is still a little bit more front heavy, and the Magpul STR helps balance that out a little bit. The EOTech, you can see I've bridged across from the upper receiver onto the rail, and that's because we also start to see a lot more magnifiers being attached. UKSF is doing a lot more action in Syria, in Afghanistan, and they're wanting a lot more of the flipped side magnifier and dot combo as opposed to just the ACOG, although you still see the ACOG quite prolifically throughout UKSF builds and the like. Obviously, we're staying with the LA5 and the Surefire M600 series. We do start to see a lot more of the M600V with the adjustable cap at the front where you can flip it from white light to IR light, and that is something that begins to carry over a lot more into UKSF rifles. We see a little bit less of the traditional just M600 line and a lot more of the V line where you're able to do that swap between white light and IR. As a whole, like I said, this is my preferred, I think, rifle setup because it strikes that balance between modernity but also that nostalgic classic feel of an L119A1. But yeah, this is the UKSF rifle. This is kind of what helped UKSF make their name in the GWOT, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful piece of nostalgia to own and build and kind of get into the details of. I've really enjoyed making this video, kind of going through the history of the 119 and particularly the A1, and just seeing how it evolved over the time and how operators started, changing it to fit their preferences as new things were coming around, or as they were even able to, given what their command was like and all that. But if y'all enjoyed this video, please, by all means, leave me a like and comment. If you did not like the video, by all means, please leave me a dislike and a hurtful and harmful comment that I will stew on as I sit in bed at 3 a.m. and just wonder why people are so mean, and I have so many faults in my life. But yeah, thank you all for joining me. If you have something you want me to do in future, by all means, leave me a comment, and I'll see y'all next time.